Okay, so are you ready to jump into this one? Isaiah 53.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of those that
It
really
gets people thinking.
so much debate and discussion.
Yeah, the suffering servant. Um, we're going to take a deep dive into this passage today.
Yeah,
A lot of really interesting stuff here.
sure is.
And it's
It really is.
yeah, it's important for both Judaism and Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Um and well, I guess we should probably start right at the beginning. Like what is it about this passage that's so
Right.
compelling? Like why do people keep coming back to it over and over again?
Well, I think part of it is that the language is just so powerful.
Right.
It's very poetic.
Yeah.
It's very evocative, and it
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
it paints this picture of this mysterious figure
Mm-hmm.
who is suffering, and it
Yeah.
it makes you want to know more.
Right. Like who is this guy?
Yeah.
And why is he suffering?
All right. And what does it all mean?
So right away in verses 2 and 3, we get this really vivid description.
Of the servant, right? We hear about this
Right.
tender shoot and a root out of dry ground.
Yeah, no beauty or majesty.
Yeah, despised and rejected, man of suffering.
Mm.
Like, what's the impact of this kind of imagery?
Well, I mean, it's pretty clear, right? That this is someone
Yeah.
who is really going through it.
Yep.
Despised and rejected. Those are
Strong words.
they're strong words.
Yeah. And they're meant to evoke a certain,
Yeah, and no beauty or majesty.
right, like they're hiding their faces from him, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Like he's someone that people don't even want to look at.
Yeah.
And tender shoot, I think, is interesting
Mm-hmm.
because it suggests this kind of fragility.
Yeah, like struggling to even survive
Exactly.
in this really harsh environment.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're reading this and you think, okay, this guy's life
Right.
is not going well.
Not at all.
But then in verses 4 through 6,
Yeah.
it takes a turn.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about the servant's own suffering anymore. It's about him taking on the suffering of others.
Exactly. Like he's bearing our griefs.
Yeah, yeah. Took up our infirmities.
He carried our sorrows.
The chastisement for our peace was upon him.
Yeah.
Like there's this concept of
Vicarious suffering,
vicarious suffering.
which is this idea that he's suffering on behalf of others.
And so that raises a huge question, right? What does it actually mean for someone to willingly carry the weight
Yeah.
of other people's burdens?
That's a big one.
Yeah. Is it an act of love? Is it a sacrifice?
Is it some kind of like cosmic balancing act? I mean, there are so many different ways to interpret that.
Yeah, and it doesn't explicitly say that he volunteered
Right.
for this role, right?
Right.
So is it a choice?
Yeah.
Or is it something that's been imposed on him?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It makes me think about times when I see bad things happening in the
Oh.
world, and you feel like,
Powerless.
yeah, totally powerless to stop it. So is the servant like a symbol of that kind of helplessness?
Yeah. Or is there like a deeper purpose
Right.
to his suffering?
And then it gets even more complex because in verses 7 through 9,
Mm-hmm.
the servant is silent.
Yeah. He's silent.
Like a lamb to the slaughter.
Yeah, as a sheep before its shearers is silent.
Yeah.
Powerful imagery.
So powerful, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do we make of that silence?
Right. Well, is it consent?
Yeah.
Is it acceptance?
Is it protest?
Yeah.
It's hard to know.
It's hard to know what's going on in his mind.
Yeah, it's really hard to reconcile
Yeah.
the injustice with the lack of outcry.
Mm.
And this idea of silent suffering,
Hmm?
it's been interpreted in so many different ways
Oh, absolutely.
throughout history.
Yeah.
So how has that played out in different theological traditions?
Well, some traditions emphasize the servant's innocence.
Mhm.
They see the silence as a way of highlighting
Okay.
the cruelty of the oppression.
Yeah.
Others see it as a sign of submission to a higher power, like he's accepting God's will,
Right.
even though it's painful.
And then there are those who see it as a form of protest.
Yeah, like a silent but powerful resistance.
Right, like he's refusing to give his oppressors
Mm-hmm.
the satisfaction of hearing him cry out.
Exactly.
Wow, it's amazing how much you can read into
Right.
just a few verses.
It's incredible.
Then in verses 10 through 12, the whole tone shifts again,
Yeah.
right? The suffering, it's given this deeper meaning,
Mm-hmm.
and it's connected to ideas of atonement and justification.
Right, yeah.
So how do those concepts fit into this picture?
Well, atonement means basically making amends.
Right.
Right, like repairing a broken relationship.
Yeah.
And in this context, it suggests that the servant's suffering
Okay.
is somehow making things right
Right.
between humanity and God.
Okay.
And then justification, that means being declared righteous. even if you've done something wrong.
Okay.
And so it's like, even though the servant is suffering unjustly, he's still considered righteous in God's eyes.
Wow. So it's almost like a complete reversal of what you'd expect.
Exactly. It's like his suffering, even though it seems meaningless,
Right.
actually has this incredible purpose.
Okay.
It's bringing about something good.
Right.
It's bringing about redemption.
So could we say that individual suffering can have a wider impact?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's certainly one way to interpret this passage.
Yeah.
That the servant's suffering is not just about him.
Right.
It's about something much bigger.
Yeah.
It's about the whole community.
And maybe even beyond that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we get to that really powerful ending where the servant is ultimately triumphant.
Yeah.
He will see his offspring and prolong his days.
He will divide the spoils with the strong.
It's a complete victory.
It is.
But what is the nature of that victory?
Right.
Like, what has he actually won?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Is that a typical military victory or anything? It's something much more profound.
It's a spiritual victory.
Yeah.
It's a victory over sin and death.
So it leaves us with a lot to think about, right? Like,
you.
how does this passage change the way we think about suffering and its potential meaning in the world?
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's a challenging passage.
Yeah, it is.
But it's also a very hopeful one,
Yeah.
I think.
Right. Like, even in the midst of suffering, there's this possibility of
Yeah.
redemption.
Absolutely.
So we started out talking about this mysterious figure, shrouded in poetic language. And we've gone through a whole range of emotions, right? From vulnerability and despair to hope and redemption. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
So as you reflect on Isaiah 53,
Yeah.
what resonates with you?
Yeah, what stands out?
Yeah, and how does it connect to your own experiences? Or maybe even change the way you view suffering in your own life
Absolutely.
or in the world around you?
Yeah, those are all good questions to think about.
Well, that's our deep dive into Isaiah 53.
Yeah.
It's a passage that's going to stay with me for a while.
Me too.
And I hope it does for you as well.
I hope so, yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.